going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. He's the right people in charge who are going to take the fall. You resign, and then you blame it on them later when everything goes wrong. His problem, though, is Caroline Ellison flipped on him.
So she definitely flipped on him.
She was smart. Yeah. She cooperated. I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and I have to do that. So by the 3rd interview, I'd studied him, and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to it was the terms of I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with like hucksters and fraud, where when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer, like investment funds. They invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it, because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want, there were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted is inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So then he launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas. We're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to
Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies. And like, you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100. And that's going to be like one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are like, might be one of the first like trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys. Or a lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the like most fair case you could make about on sticks or something. Like, it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? You're outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese, which thankfully she did, and she's fine now. She takes medication to replace the hormones her thyroid would generate. But I saw my mom kind of get swept in this thing that I knew was nonsense.
But it wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to like be that successful, that you just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking.
I saw all this, and that my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video. His whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet. And he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. He thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, all these other wallets that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like, it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea. Where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like, this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like, you put their money, but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no located out in the Bahamas, which is a great place to put your.
Why do they do it in the Bahamas?
Because it's unregulated. So the problem with doing stuff in the United States, all these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other, being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal. I lied my way into it. I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff, caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just this.
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16. Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's like, well, BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it.
Right.
It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was... but ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me... I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me...
Regulated? Like, if he was doing this, like, Coinbase can't do this. Is that correct?
Yeah, Coinbase is much more heavily scrutinized. They actually have to file with the SEC.
Each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like, it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately, that's the problem. Like, Sam was just hopped up on
Involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019. Yep. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime, any store. Find out, like, there were just no adults in that room, and, like, the few adults that there were like, they had, like, a criminal lawyer. Anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy, Dan Freed. They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you win not having sort of like it's maybe not big enough. They're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding something. Because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? Why are these for a while? But like, so I eventually like pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers, and I wanted somebody to say.
So when I see something like that go down, I'm like, how did he get Steven Spielberg? How does someone like a Bernie Madoff or Sam Bankman-Fried, how does he get these people to do this?
Actually, they've recently been shut down, but the idea was
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better?
Hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange, and so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron.
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone. And
so he called it fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled. I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old. Just buy my course. My course is, $2,000. Pay me $2,000. I'll teach you to get rich quick. So Ethereum, what are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos. Everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, And why is so much of your balance sheet made up of your own tokens? It's a big question. So one of the things that FTX had done, and a lot of companies were doing at the time, and then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to. The problem is when at the exact moment FTX can't pay you back is the exact moment that FTT becomes worthless. So you think you have all this collateral, and it just was kind of. I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to even before that, I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like, no, they're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you just put like let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into. The money system has to be safe. Like, your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like,
Yeah.
or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to.
What is it's a crypto exchange, right? So how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto, make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had. Yeah, tokens is the individual. You can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you have Bitcoin. Then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum. He'd be afraid of being indicted, or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, like he was basically going to get a bad deal. You think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back. FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had to look at their books. Like, it was very opaque service that said, you cannot move, like when I deposit with you, you're not going to touch my money. And I said, Sam, if that's true, where's the money of all these people? And then he goes into the crypto space and he launches FTX.
He's very young, right? How old is he?
I think he is young. I'm not, maybe you can look that up, Jamie. 31.
It was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that. And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I studied, with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in a stew. Gay, so can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it?
No. Basically, they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So hey, you're going to be the guy. With fact that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire. He's sort of the next Warren Buffett. That when everything goes wrong, lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams.
The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse, the things, it's insane. It's really, I almost wish.
What he said in one of the interviews, he goes, no one believes me when I said I donated dark because no one believes anyone would be everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly. Reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, they all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says this is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. They had a Serum token, which they control most of. Shocking. thing. And I think that shows, like, if you're running a shady empire, like, who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get in?
Guy who enabled God, or who helped cover up God mode. And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, people, or it's just like.
Well, how does he skate on that? Like, how?
These guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? If you're Alameda Research and you're funneling money through a personal investor, that I think is the problem. There were things that were coming out, like questions about, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So like the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it. That's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out? And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is
Binance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just the problem is a lot of it's a black box.
Through crypto.
Ransomware, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Because before, it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much scrutiny. The son of Harvard lawyers, we just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he was pill fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like, you have to do... I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, like, scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, it's almost useless. So this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to. He's doing interviews with that. Now I can just send you $100K. It's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people kidnap people's data and things along those lines, they like to get paid and probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was. At the end, when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me on, let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, we
figured it out, and someone would have started dumping their coin.
Yeah, people already, even leading up, like CZ gets a lot of the credit for it, but like already, like a day before.
Gotten away with it?
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources. Launches FTX in 2019, and that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. Z on Twitter, I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and right. The inflation rate, I think, is like 75% or something like that. Like it's an unimaginable, it's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time.
It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. Like CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know, whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's
sure.
a shark. Executives Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam. Sam knew all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. The account, fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured. I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay. I'm not going to stop making these videos. What I know is everyone's always interested in pulling up the ladder after them and like building the kind of the rule book around like, hey, like if you're from this certain jurisdiction that we're a part of, you're fine. If you're not, Like after the fact, he's like he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre. I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to the whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
you put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does that work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cash. To store your money somewhere else. How do you store it? So there's this idea of like these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that like, hey, if you're someone like me, this stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of stuff. You're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities of was going on? Now he's still like trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent, and right now, actually, the big like kind of Skateberg shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy.
What was his? I remember, but what was his? And then when you have him on, there's a lot of I wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I don't know. There was all this hemming and
ultimately going to find out what we're doing here.
How many more of these are out there in the world?
As big as FTX, right? It's all at some address. And so people were asking, like, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum? You can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this, like, fancy language for a way to, like, anonymize your transaction. Like, you put it LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through who is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of, like, caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all. Don't invest. Like, that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling, there was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few party.
That's right, but
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, like these exchanges where it was worth more. So he was arbitraging this difference in prices. And then after he made his money that way,
What was the first video?
I started as sort of like an interview show, nothing about scams. I had a channel before it. That these basically nerds in cryptography thought of, which is it's brilliant. I mean, it is brilliant because it is basically it's almost impossible to trace. It is the experience of the lawyer that FTX then hires is like being complicit on a leaked private call, trying to cover up this God mode scam. Everything. I don't have access to the book. Like I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, "Where's the money?" He goes, "Well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda. Not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now." And then it became you have Dogecoin, you have SafeMoon, you have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange, balances, but oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like I forgot. It's so silly. You find was going to undo sort of everything. Like if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're great, I'm blanking on the name right now. But
A1Z? What is that?
No. I'm sorry. I'm blanking on. It's this famous. I'm going to remember it right after I get out of here. It's one of the famous what that was to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our balance. He's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. Success. 2 months, you're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this. It wasn't like he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after like the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over.
Whoa.
So it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like they had hidden all their numbers. Like Sam had calling that a fraud early. I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud money system. Especially in our modern age, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person. That's the issue was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who like pushed over the house made fine, but FTX was sort of the worst offender. Is let's say I give you a loan, Joe. So an unsecured loan would be I give you $1 million and I don't ask for anything. I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college and all my friends get an MLMs, multi-level marketing, sort of like just like the hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these like get rich seminars.
People that were standing out and saying none of this makes sense.
Right.
And who were those people?
So there were a few people. There was Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of two Harvard lawyers.
I watched the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him
That's John Ray. Yeah.
Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing. Analogy for losing your house.
You know what's funny? Yeah.
Good Lord.
The idea of these mixers was you'd anonymize your transactions. So, like, let's say, he was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane. But as Coinbase, it seems like they're, legitimate. But so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like, if you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China. Like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here. Maybe that's a big deal. It's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by C. You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild, too. The whole scene was wild.
He blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer have to... my feeling is offshore entities should not be... They're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore, I don't know. It's very crypto keys all the time. It's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else, but a lot of FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
He cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out this thing. So all this money's going in, and then you basically wait. And as you're waiting, Ethereum's going out everywhere. A bunch of people are withdrawing, right? Because they're also taking their money out.
Right.
By the time everyone loses confidence, everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So a story broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? He happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have...
And one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. We're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically they call them straw donors, because it's like, if I give money to you to give regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations.
Then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader, and he goes start trading with it. Unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But like they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it, and that's where the disaster started. Change that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
On your dollars or whatever, euros or whatever, and you put it into this crypto exchange. They have a bank, and they work with that bank. Then they exchange. But like, it was very clear the internal conversations were they knew they were committing fraud. They knew they were doing things wrong. And this idea was, well, no one's going to catch us, right? Nobody's. In the terms of service, they said,